Now will we see the magic?
All right, where's Murray? Okay, who is it?
This is Jesus, kid.
Know then that it is the year 10,191.
Yes, we are bored. We're all bored now.
Hi, good night.
Good night.
Hello, and welcome to Mary versus the Movies with your host, Mary Jones.
And Dennis Ling.
And this week we are actually not going to watch... what did I say we were going to watch? Silverado?
Silverado.
No. No, due to a scheduling conflict, we will not be joined by my sister this week. We will do that soon.
Why don't you come to your senses? Okay.
Why don't you come to your senses? So, it's been a long week for us. A hard week. At times, scary week. Not scary, but... Well, yeah, driving down a highway with, like, your fender suddenly coming off and lightning
everywhere.
Everywhere. That actually does count as scary. Yeah. So, after...
A little funny, though, too.
In retrospect, I suppose. At the time, it was not.
Right.
So, after what was a pretty harsh week and not being able to sit down with my sister to watch the film this weekend, we thought to ourselves, okay, well, I still want to put an episode out. And I needed something that would be a balm for the soul. And so I remembered.
Porky's.
No. No. You know what? Porky's did not come up in my list of films under 90 minutes. So,
okay.
Yeah, that's... No. Instead, I thought of a film that I brought up on our very first episode. My Neighbor Totoro.
Huh.
And so we are going to watch that this week.
I believe the version we have is subtitles. So.
Well, actually, there's a good question. Do we watch the subtitled version or do we watch what's on HBO Max?
Oh, I don't know.
I don't know.
A yappy version?
Has it been dubbed? I don't know.
I don't know.
So, that it brings up an interesting question. The difference between dubbed and subtitles is important.
Yeah.
And I've seen both dubbed versions and subtitled versions of Studio Ghibli films. I've seen the subtitled version of Kiki's Delivery Service. I've seen the dubbed version of Howl's Moving Castle. So, both have their benefits and both have...
I feel like Princess Mononoke, they made a big deal of all these like celebrity voices and stuff.
Right.
And it's like, yeah,
and nobody
why
liked
did you
it.
do that?
Yeah. No, that's considered one of their weaker efforts. But this was... I don't think this... So, okay. I've never seen My Neighbor Totoro. I don't know anything about it. I know that there is something called a cat bus. And there's a big fuzzy guy that is very popular sort of mascot for the studio. Other than that, I don't really know anything that happens in it. I don't know why I never saw it as a kid, other than I have no idea what its distribution was in the 80s. And I just never... I mean, by the time it was the 90s and I might have caught it on cable, I was probably one of those obnoxious teenagers who was like, I'm too old for cartoons. Leave me alone. I'm busy watching films for adults like Singles.
Well, I never saw that.
I liked it.
Oh.
Oh, isn't that a Cameron Crowe film?
I think so.
Yeah, actually, it's funny. I'm making fun of Singles, and yet I liked that movie, and I have the soundtrack. So I never saw My Neighbor Totoro, and it's not that I never saw anime either. There was no avoidance. It just never showed up in my life. And yet I know a lot of people who have seen it and love it, and it's considered, one of Miyazaki's great movies. So I'm looking forward to it. I've certainly loved other stuff of his that I've seen.
Yeah, his stuff seems to have, like, antagonists that end up not being antagonists.
Well,
that kind of thing.
Yeah,
it kind of subverts a lot of, like, Western, like, ideas of how plots are driven and stuff.
Miyazaki is interesting because even in the but it's when you talk about Western, even when you bring that up, like Howl's Moving Castle was based on, I think, like an English woman's novel. Kiki's Delivery Service, I think, is set in Sweden or something.
But it always feels like he's blending Japanese stuff with European stuff.
Well, he is always a cross-cultural. I shouldn't say he's always, but he frequently makes cross-cultural films. The films of his that I've seen are not trapped in the sort of simplistic heroes and villains type of story that you've seen a million times, or here is a Grimm Brothers Western fairy tale girl who has to be rescued by a prince. Right. That is not what his films that I've seen are about. So, and I don't expect this film to be about that. I don't really know what happens in this movie, though. I don't know like what kind of protagonists are. It looks like there are children who hang out with a big furry guy, and they get on a cat bus at some point. And that is all I know. And you know what? That sounds so soothing, and just something I need right now. Just because it's just been a rough week. So this seems like the kind of film that it would be good to watch. I don't know if the microphones are picking up the birds that are tweeting all around us outside, but it feels like it fits for what we're doing. And so, you know what? I don't mind. All right. So, do you have any thoughts on Miyazaki before we go watch the film?
No, we can watch it.
Okay. So, yeah, I don't know what to predict in this. I just know that some kids hang out with a big furry dude, and who I assume that is, in fact, the neighbor. I don't know for a fact, but I assume the big furry guy is the neighbor Totoro. Other than that, I don't know.
Maybe a source for Gritty.
He seems much more of a gentle presence than Gritty.
Gritty has his gentle side every now and then.
I mean, Gritty looks like he'd stepped out of an anime.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Maybe he's one of the like weird demon dudes from is it House?
Spirited Away?
Spirited Away, yes, that's what I'm trying to think of. He does seem like he stepped out of Spirited Away. Yeah. And you know what? I'm just gonna go with that.
All right.
So all right, let's go watch the movie. So, number one, I'm going to blame the American actor John Turturro for the reason that I completely mispronounced the name of this film. It is not Totoro, it's Totoro. Totoro. So I'm going to start off with I don't want to bring the room down, but I got to get this out of the way. When I was a kid, I grew up in Philadelphia, and my father had cancer, and he died when I was 7. I have a little sister. Well, she's not little now; she's 40. But I have a younger sister, and So it was just me and my sister and my mom for a long time. And after my father died, my mom, who was a nurse, got a job at a hospital outside of Philadelphia, quite a bit outside of Philadelphia. And we had to move out to rural Pennsylvania. And so watching this movie about 2 young girls whose mother is in the hospital with a severe illness and who have just moved to rural Japan. That hit home. This film had a lot of resonance for me. Sure. Suddenly like living in a rural area. I don't. Let's just say I was very relieved by the end of the film. Because this movie is a fairy tale, and it was very much a fairy tale for me watching it. because at the end of the film, the mother doesn't die. They don't say what's wrong with her, but I quickly was, looking up facts about the film before we turned the recording back on. And Miyazaki, his mother, had spinal tuberculosis when he was a kid and spent something like 9 years in the hospital.
Oh, wow. So
this was kind of an autobiographical thing for him. And, from the sound of it, she did eventually recover, but, it's very difficult when your parent is in the hospital with an illness and you're forced to try to grow up very quickly and have to deal with things that you aren't necessarily ready for. But then, is anyone ever really ready? But it is especially hard when you're a kid. And they do allude to that at the end of the film. Sorry, I don't want to get emotional because this was such a delightful movie. I loved it so much.
Yeah,
it was so much fun. It was just
you're allowed to get emotional over films.
Well, especially this.
Especially this kind of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the story is briefly. Satsuki and her younger sister Mei are, living with their father, who is a professor at a university. Their mother lives far away in the hospital. And a lot of the film, I honestly thought there was going to be a lot more magical stuff in it. I thought it was going to be much more of the forest spirits and hanging out with them. And I did not realize it was going to be much more of a domestic, a lot of times slice of life, a lot of times just about these two girls dealing with, the beginning of the film is the family moving to their new home in rural Japan. And it looks like a very old traditional Japanese house. It's raised on a platform and it's a lot of sliding doors and the rice paper walls, and you take your shoes off. Well, I mean, you take your shoes off anyway in most cultures, but and so a lot of the beginning of the movie is just them setting up living in this new situation and getting to know their neighbors.
A lot of classic shots that you've seen in Kurosawa and also of course Studio Ghibli of the sky and the waterfalls and the clouds and the trees looking like each other.
Yeah. Oh, one thing I really love actually about the way that this is animated is there are a lot of times where there are, for instance, flowers, and they drew flowers that exist in real life. There were times watching this and I said, oh my goodness, those are irises. They went and drew accurate irises. It's like that little attention to detail that is so gorgeous.
It's interesting, Disney's, famous for their animation style.
Yeah.
I think they focus far more on the form and anatomy.
Yeah.
And just animals and type of things and that kind of thing. I don't think Disney focuses much on flowers and trees and, what kind of tree would be in this particular forest or something.
Yeah, there is an attention to the natural world in this film that you don't see a lot of. And especially in mainstream animated film. Not in a long time, I would say.
It just a lot of Miyazaki films just feel like these meditations on gardens.
Yeah, yeah.
Or grass, or or just how a room creaks.
So yeah, the magical elements are when they move into the new house. The first thing that happens is the two girls see these soot goblins, which are just, that's basically these little, imagine dandelion puffs, but they're black. Right. And they scurry around the house and, they scurry as soon as light hits them, they try to run out. And the thing is, what I like about the film is that all of the fantastical elements are real. There are times where it hints to oh, you were dreaming this. Oh, it's you think you saw this, but you didn't see it. But the film doesn't want you to think that, which I really appreciate. So that when she sees the soot goblins, and May, the younger girl, she captures one in her hand. When she opens them again, it's not like there's nothing there. They're still all over her hands and then all over her feet. So there's never a sense that these spirits aren't real. People can't often see them. And in fact, other people will, especially like the old woman granny, will say, "Oh, you saw the soot goblins. You're very lucky that you get to see them." And Dad never tries to dissuade them from thinking that, these spirits are real.
Every now and then he's a little weirded out.
Yeah. But for the most part, he is willing to accept that, you know what? If they see that, I'm not going to be I'm not contradicting them. And I don't know if that is because it's a film for children and the idea isn't to build up, oh, these things aren't real. I don't know if that's because Japan traditionally has boy, I don't want to get like culturally essentialist because there's a lot I don't know, but everything I've read is that traditional belief in Japan is animist, which means that the idea is that everything has a spirit, everything is animated in that sense. And so it would not be that weird for there to be soot goblins or spirits dwelling in the forest, or that, everything that exists has a sort of spirit in it, an essential self, right? So I don't know if the reality of all of the forest spirits and everything is allowed in the film because this is actually just kind of old-fashioned traditional Japanese thought, or if this is because the film wants a certain reality where you're not trying to doubt that things exist, because like that would just distract from the film. Because like in a typical film, it's just like, oh, you didn't really see that, fairies aren't real. And in this film, the reality is, no, of course they're real. You just don't always see them, or you almost never get to see them, or if you do see them, you're very special. And so there's not that sort of rational intrusion that often happens in a lot of American-style children's films and stories, which I really appreciated. So yeah, first we meet the soot goblins, and they eventually go away, and well, they don't go away entirely, but they kind of recede into the background because the idea is that once the house has been inhabited, they don't really have to live there anymore. They don't want noisy neighbors, i.e. human beings, so they leave the house. And once they leave the house, then we encounter the Totoro. And
Now, are all three Totoros?
They are all Totoros, because apparently Totoro is May mispronouncing the word troll. It's very quick in the film, but you see that she's reading a book.
Right.
And apparently the book is The Three Billy Goats Gruff. So, obviously there's the troll under the bridge.
Right.
And so the troll, I think, in her storybook apparently looks like the Totoro. And so we get 3 Totoros.
The first one just looks like a rabbit.
Yeah,
First.
it just looks like a little rabbit. And I think that's called a chibi Totoro. That's the little tiny one. And then you have like a medium-sized one, which is the Chu Totoro. And that's the blue guy.
Nice.
And so he looks like he's probably about the size of, I don't know, what would you say? If the little guy is maybe the size of a basketball.
An Ewok?
Sure, I'll give you an Ewok.
Yeah.
Really? Wait. All right, fine. He's the size of an Ewok. And then you get what in English they call, apparently he's called King Totoro. Okay. I forget what the term is in Japanese, but in English he's dubbed the King Totoro. And that's the big gray one.
Right. And
he looks like a cross between like a cat, a bear, and a gumdrop.
Yeah.
And if you've ever seen anything like about Studio Ghibli, you've seen him. He's like shaggy. He's gray. He's got like kind of little pointy ears.
Yeah, his ears look like little trees in a way.
Yeah, I can see that.
Yeah.
And they live like on the edge of the property where the family lives is like a forest. And there is a big tree at the center of this forest. May goes wandering off, following the little Totoro, who dives into a hole in the thicket, which is a really nice echo of the beginning of the film. When they first get to the house, they have to go through cave of the trees that is the path up to their house. So the beginning of the film is they get to their house, they go through this path through the trees. It's almost like a cave of trees, and they end up at their house.
I think Satsuki even mentions it too.
She may.
It's a cave of trees.
She
tunnel of trees.
Tunnel of trees. Tunnel is the word I'm looking for.
Right.
It's a tunnel of trees. And so then when Mei follows the Totoro to the thicket, she goes through a very similar but very small tunnel of it's more like bushes instead of trees.
Yeah.
But it's a nice echo of going from into their house to going into Totoro's house,
Right.
which is at the center of the forest in the tree. And so there's a nice sort of symmetry there. And it actually, I like that because it's this idea of, so typical, if you went and followed a spirit into the forest like that and you came to their house, this would be like a scary thing.
Right.
And the idea here is that there's nothing scary about it. I like the way that plays out.
Mm-hmm.
It's a very different take on forest spirits than what you would find in, say, English myth or whatever.
So one thing I don't understand. So the little Totoros are taking acorns back. Like, where are they? They're collecting acorns underneath the house.
Yeah. Well, remember what Granny says is, or I don't remember if it's Granny or if it's their dad who says, you can't see these forest spirits unless they want you to see them. So when she sees the middle-sized the Chu Totoro run by with a bunch of acorns in a sack, leading her, on a trail,
Right.
I think we're supposed to know that that's intentional. Like, they're letting her see them and essentially giving her a trail to follow. This is entirely intentional. It definitely echoes, like, a lot of the visual stuff of that whole sequence of when she's, finds them and follows them. It very much echoes like Alice in Wonderland. They're perfectly happy to get to know Mei. Because later in the film, they don't hesitate to help. When Satsuki has to go and find her sister, and she essentially asks the forest, please let me see Totoro, the forest lets her in. He immediately helps her when she is explaining that Mei has gone missing. And so I think the idea is that they want to be known, they want to help. Towards the end of the film, mom is sick and she was supposed to come home, but she can't come home. So dad goes off to the hospital in the city. Mei has been helping in Granny's garden, and they have all these wonderful vegetables that they've picked. And finding out that mom isn't coming home, Mei flips out and she's like, I'm going to the hospital. I'm going to bring her this corn that I picked myself because she needs to eat it to get better. So the last third of the film or so is Mei runs off to try to walk to the hospital, and of course this brings out all the villagers to try to find her. And so then the end of the film is Satsuki trying to find her sister, and with all the villagers, all of the neighbors trying to help her and look for the girl. The last neighbor who hasn't yet helped is Totoro, because he's asleep in his tree. So she is able to go and get him, and he calls up the cat bus, and they go riding off through the countryside looking for Mei, and they do eventually find her. And I mean, it's just this sort of wonderful sequence of riding on the cat bus, and
they can't be seen while they're on the cat bus.
And that's the thing, like, it's real. They can't be seen because the spirits don't want to be seen at that moment, but it's all really happening. There is a moment where, when they finally do find Mei, she is standing by a bunch of statues.
Right.
And I was just, again, because I was looking up facts on IMDb, apparently those are those statues represent types of a type of bodhisattva that watches over children, apparently.
Oh.
Yeah, so, I mean, this is something that I suppose if you are Japanese, you would recognize what those statues are meant to represent. But the idea is that she's being watched over by kindly spirits. She's never really in danger. Because there's at one point they think she may have drowned in one of the rice paddies.
Right.
They
find a sandal in
the water, and
and they think it's hers, but it's not.
But it's not. And so, in the end, the cat bus takes Satsuki to find Mei, and then they go off and ride off to the hospital, where they watch from outside they see that their dad is with their mom and they're laughing, and she really does only have a cold. She will get to come home. And May leaves behind her ear of corn where she has scratched into it for mommy and left it on the windowsill, and they disappear back off to home. The cat bus takes them home. And that's the end of the film. Mom is going to come home, and their life is going to continue. And so this is just like a little space in their life and the adventure that they had briefly, because they had some kindly spirits that lived next door, essentially. and that's it.
Yep.
And it's a really beautiful film.
It is.
It's just visually stunning. There is the scene where Satsuki is running through the countryside looking for her sister, and it is sunset, and there is a moment where they animate her she's just stops and is looking towards the sunset, and she's already like half grieving for her mother and terrified that her sister is dead and doesn't know what's happening, and she's just so overcome. And the way that they animate the sky with at its sunset, like I was choked up watching it. It's a very emotional scene, but what's amazing is the way they make the sky glow. Watching it, you have the illusion of you're looking at actual light, and it's really amazing.
There's also early in that little scene when she's running, and it's obviously dusk, like the sun's going down, but every now and then they'll have a shot of her running by these trees, and there's lights coming through the trees, and you'll hear these really loud, like crickets or something.
Yeah.
But it's just whenever you see those trees and stuff, and then it moves on and somewhere else, and it still looks like daytime, but it's kind of like that thing with dusk where if you go to some places it seems more like night than others.
Yeah.
There's just so many amazing effects that they kind of I don't know, they just really capture dusk and like that kind of weird. The
way that they capture light in this, light and darkness, and I'm always amazed by animation that can do that. This is going to sound stupid, but see, I'm not an artist, right? Like I can sketch, but I don't paint really. I mean, I've painted, but I'm not a good painter. And
you've written too.
Yeah. But
kind of the same thing.
Well, no, because here's where I'm going with this. Right. What amazes me is when you can paint something and the idea that something glows comes through. Like, I'm still thinking about that sky. Yeah. And there was something about where it was so luminous in a way that you normally only experience in real life.
Right.
And I don't know how artists do that, but it amazes me. Because even though I know I'm looking at a drawing, and it's not that it's a photorealistic drawing at all, but there is something about the way it's illuminated that is realistic. Does that make sense?
Sure.
And I don't know how animators accomplish that, but when they do, or when anybody just, doing visual art does that, I'm always just astounded. It's just so beautiful. And I don't know, the way that the natural world was conveyed in this film, it's sort of, I was fascinated because to me, like, it has one foot in the Impressionists and one foot in, like, I don't know, 20th century, Western animation. The best possible examples of, man, this is going to sound dumb, but I always think about how good the early Tom and Jerry cartoons are.
Sure.
Because they're really, really good at drawing things like food. Mm-hmm. And like, I'm talking like the ones from like the early 40s where they were winning Academy Awards. If you go back and watch those Tom and Jerry cartoons, and there is some luscious artwork in them, right?
Yeah, those are good. Also, the early Popeye.
Yeah.
Like that Sinbad cave one. That's amazing.
Yeah. Like, there's something about the way that they're able to capture the spirit of what they're drawing.
It treated both sisters as, like fully fledged characters.
Yeah.
And they were both dealing with things differently. Like, so May, she was, she just kind of plows through life, and then she just gets really angry every now and then.
Yeah.
And it's like she just kind of rides her emotions and stuff, and she's too young to really controlled them and stuff.
Yeah.
Whereas Satsuki, like, she's trying to be an adult the whole time, and obviously it kind of overwhelms her.
There's the scene where Satsuki has to go and make lunch for everybody because Dad completely forgot.
Right.
And, when I was a kid, because she's supposed to be about 10 or 11, I think.
Right.
And, by the time I was like 10 and we were living out in Gilbertsville, there were a lot of chores I had to, figure out how to do myself, which is fine. I don't think that's a bad thing. I think it's good for kids to have to pitch in because parents are busy. And if a child is able to do a thing, you ought to be able to do for yourself if you're able-bodied. But at the same time, it is sort of, I don't know. It really, man, this one really hit home for me. But yeah, no, this is a film that has a really good handle on these girls as fully fledged humans and as real characters with their own personalities. And it's just wonderful.
Yeah. It reminds me a little bit of Lionel Richie Wardrobe.
Okay.
The two girls there.
Sure.
Because Susan, it definitely feels like she's just at the age where she can still see magic and stuff.
Yeah.
In a few years, she's not going to be able to.
Oh, and
Yeah.
that's explicitly what happens.
Mm-hmm.
So what'd you think of the dub?
Oh, it was fine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I really liked the Fanning sisters.
Yeah.
I thought they were really good as...
I've liked them in other things.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, definitely. No, and they were young here.
Yeah.
This is, I guess, Elle Fanning's first film.
Mm-hmm.
And no, I thought they did a great job, actually, as the voices of the girls. Tim Daly, that was fine. I mean, whatever.
Well, who was he?
The father.
Oh.
Yeah.
You know what? It was interesting. We quickly watched an 88 version that we had.
Yeah.
Which was, well, I'm glad we didn't watch because it looked terrible.
Yeah, that was not a good copy.
But it wasn't dubbed, it was subtitles. I found I was looking at the dad differently,
Oh, okay.
I found that the dad just seemed more, I don't know, flippant or a little more adult, I guess, in the Japanese one than...
You know what? He sounded a bit more stressed out.
Yeah.
Which makes sense. And actually, I think that it would have been nicer if that came across in Daly's performance.
Yeah.
So, are we ready to wrap it up?
Yep.
Or do you have anything else to say?
No, I think
Okay.
so.
All right.
So, are we watching Silverado next week?
Yeah, that is the plan. Is I hopefully over the weekend we will be able to work with my sister and get to watch Silverado.
We almost watched Fast Times at Ridgemont High, but...
Yeah, but I wanted... I don't know. I don't know. For some reason, I was like... Because they're actually about the same length. The films are about the same length. But
You wanted to relax, and you found out
Yeah.
about two sisters and a sick parent.
I mean, that's basically what it is. Like, I wanted to relax, man. I'd had a bad week. And now I'm watching these two girls, and they're like, oh, mom is dying. Yeah, that was rough.
Yep.
It was a beautiful film, and it had a very happy ending, and I'm so glad we watched it. But let me tell you, I got about an hour in when the telegram shows up, and it's like, mom is at the mom's in the hospital, and she can't come home, and I'm just like, no, I can't do this. Yeah, So hopefully next time we'll be watching Silverado and get back on schedule. But you know what? This was a nice diversion, alternative, whatever. So that was My Neighbor Totoro. Follow us on social media. We are on Twitter at Mary VS Movies. You can also email us with any thoughts, requests, complaints. maryvsmovies@gmail.com.
Definitely email us complaints.
What?
Yeah.
Why?
I don't know.
You can read those.
I'll read them. Yeah, that'd be fun.
We've never gotten any email anyway. It doesn't really matter. So yeah, please follow us on social media. You can review and subscribe and whatever the podcast on various platforms. We are on Apple/iTunes, whatever they're calling it now. We are on Spotify. You can get us through your different podcatchers that you use. So yes, please drop us a line, say hello, follow us, etc., so on and so forth. And until next time.